So the next thing we're going to talk about is how to run a chemistry or comprehensive or electrolyte panel on our DX5 machine from Heska. So this is going to run our liver values, kidney values, electrolytes, basic body function values. So the tube that we obtain our sample in is going to be the green top tube. If we're using the 1.5 mil tube, ideally we like to fill it up at least halfway, so there's a line right here or up to the near the top to get an adequate amount of plasma sample once we spin it down. So once you've obtained your blood in your green top tube, we are going to then place it in our centrifuge. So this is going to spin our sample down to the plasma sample that we need to run in the machine. If you're not available to immediately start spinning your sample, you do need to place your sample on the rocker here. So this just rocks the sample back and forth. It keeps everything thoroughly mixed. Once that's complete, you will counterbalance your tube. So we have our water filled up to the appropriate amount of where our sample is filled up to properly counterbalance once we start spinning. So we have our spun sample here. So this is after we've spun it. As you can see, the plasma is separated from the red blood cells. So we will place that in there. You close your lid here and press down, and that starts the spinning process. There is no timer, so we usually like to spin our samples for a minimum of 3 to 5 minutes. That way everything's nice and separated. Then we'll be ready to run after that. Alright, our next machine here is our Element DC5X. So this machine is going to run our comprehensive chemistry panels and electrolyte panels. So if you walk up to this machine, it looks like it's asleep since the screen's off currently. So to wake it up, all you'll do is tap the screen here. This will pop up. So these A, B, C, D, E are our spots that run the samples. So you can run up to 5 at one time if needed. So next we'll open our lid here, and this kind of displays our spots to run the samples. So each well here holds your green top or red top tube. So the green top tubes are the lithium heparin tubes that we spin down to get the plasma. You can run plasma on this machine. You can also run serum on this machine. So that's going to be our red top tubes. The cartridges that we use for the test itself sit down in these little labeled wells here. Yeah, slide holders here. So we'll show you how to properly load the slides. It is important that you properly load them in a certain way for the machine to correctly run. If you are running an electrolyte sample, there is one step that is an extra step that's needed. So to run electrolytes, we do have a reagent that runs the electrolytes. It's in this little tube here that uses this little lever. And this reagent solution does need to be changed every 24 hours to appropriately give appropriate results for electrolytes. So we'll go up here to our little sheet here and check and see when this was last changed, and if it's more than 24 hours, then we will need to change that. So to change that out, all you'll do is lift this little lever and take this out, and we will just dump this in the sink. And then to change the reagent out, the reagent lives in the fridge right here. So it's in this little box that says reference fluid right here, and we have a couple boxes. You can just grab an open reagent solution and make sure it is in date, which does look like this one is. I'm gonna do that. So to add this, we're just gonna grab a pipette from the drawer here. And we usually like to fill it up about 3/4 of the way full. So we'll just pipette out some of the solution and just go directly into this tube. Okay, so we're about to the top there, which is plenty. So we'll just put this back in the fridge. This we'll just place down in here. You just need to make sure that's nice and seated and it's not crooked or anything, so that your little rubber stopper sits level there. Okay, and then we'll just mark that we've changed this out. We'll note the date and the time, which is 4:30, and our initials. Okay, so at this point we can enter our patient information of prior to running our test. So you can choose any open letter here. So we'll just choose B. Okay, and then we'll have this pop up, which our sample ID is our patient ID. And then you'll just hit OK. And then the next important step here is we're going to want to choose our animal. So this is a dog. You should never have to touch this sample type, as this is always set to, this machine is calibrated to run off of plasma or serum only. So you don't need to touch this. And then the dilution you shouldn't have to touch if you're running a sample to start, unless your doctor does request a dilution. The number line up here, you shouldn't have to worry about changing. It just keeps up with what number the tests are. The only thing you should be entering is the sample ID, which is the patient ID, and then the species, animal. At this point, we'll just hit OK. This will populate our patient ID number here, and the machine is ready to run at this point once you've loaded your sample and your slides. Okay, so next step, once you've entered your patient ID information and loaded, or you've told the machine you're ready to run your test, we're going to go back to, so we're on our patient here. We'll go to quick invoicing to charge for the appropriate test. And this will also send it to QBEX for us to get our slides out. So type in comprehensive. And it should populate at the top here, so Heska Comprehensive Chemistry. And then if your doctor also wants electrolytes, we'll type in electrolytes. So like the CBC, this does not go over like IDEX to the machine, but it does appropriately charge for your tests. And then we'll come over to the QBEX and we'll get our slides out. Okay, so over here it's populated our test that we need. So we're going to choose the comprehensive chemistry and then the electrolyte. And you'll just click in the little box here. There we go. And once both of the ones you want are checked, you'll just hit issue items. We'll come over to the refrigerator. These do live in the fridge. Okay, so all of our Heska tests live here in the refrigerator in these panels here. So we have our liver panel, electrolytes, which we'll need a slide of those. Electrolytes are the sodium, potassium, and chloride, and it is one single slide that does run all three values. We also have kidney panels. We have a pre-surgical panel, which is an abbreviated comprehensive panel. And then we have our full comprehensive here, which is, this is the test we want. So if you're opening a new box of these samples, it is important to run the QR code through the machine, which is the little, or sorry, QC code that comes in a new box, or each box has one. When you open a new box, the machine will ask for this to be associated with these tests. So before you run your sample on a new box of open slides, you do enter this in this little slit right here. So we have an arrow. We have an arrow right here that shows you the direction. So all you do is slide this in like a credit card in a way and hold it in there. And you'll hear a beep and a ding, and that means that the data was read successfully. So you'll just hit OK, And that is only for in which you open a new box. You don't have to do that every time. Okay, so now at this point we're going to load our slides. So we're just going to make sure our test is in B. So we'll choose B here to put our slides. There is a weight in here. So to load these slides, just open our pack here. The comprehensive packs are packaged together, so they're all in this little bundle with a little plastic piece around them. To load these slides, it's important the letters go towards the letter on the outside. If you were to place them around like this, it will not properly run. So you just want to make sure that the letters are towards the letter. You just slide them down in here.
It's where you need it.
Sorry, here, let's get our little tab. Slide them down and you'll pull the little plastic tab off, and that seats your slides down in there appropriately. Electrolyte slides, like I was saying, are the single slide. So when you're opening it, you just want to make sure you're not handling it too much. So having your fingers only on the outside, not touching anywhere here or anywhere here, as this can affect your results. So try to just touch on the outside of the slide. So the electrolyte slide does have 2 arrows. So the arrows are going to be pointed towards the back, away from the letters, and that's important as it'll not run it properly if they are not placed properly. There is also a direction here of how to place in the electrolyte slides if you forget. So arrows towards the back. Once you have your test loaded, or slides loaded, you're going to place your weight on the top. That holds everything in. I always like to double check on the bottom, as there is a little opening here that no slide is like pushed too far forward. Kind of push them towards the back so they're seated properly. Once that's done, you'll just set it directly down back in your little spot here. And now we're ready to load our sample and start our test. Once we've spun our sample down for the appropriate amount of time, you'll take your sample out, and at this point we can either transfer our plasma off of our green top tube into a red top tube, or you can also run it as is like this. So we can just uncap and place our tube into our spot here. So these hold the tube itself. So as you can see, it's 1.5 ml, which is this size tube. If it were the smaller green top tube, it'll be the 0.5 ml sleeve. So you want to make sure you're putting the right size tube in the right size spot.
Or you can accidentally put the small one in here, but the big one will not fit in the half.
Correct. Okay, and those are easily just swapped out. You can move them wherever you need to move them. So tips are all loaded in the back here, and these are what aspirate your sample, and you just need to make sure before you're running a sample that that is loaded. Okay, at this point we're ready to run. So we like to close this just to keep the dust out as best as possible. So just leave it closed if you're not in use, and we'll hit start. At this point we are running. This takes about 7 to 8 minutes to run a full test, and results will transfer to eVet.